Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday Writer Speak. Today we have Susan Minot and Ursula Hegi reading with us today. It's great to have this communal feel right now. Normally we'd be in Chancellor's Hall or in the Manhattan building, having a drink, talking about working too much, having some nice awkward jokes with each other because we're all adorably socially awkward, and I miss that, and I miss you, and I hope this cyber simulation appeases that a bit. And part of that is having two teachers and writers and experts that are a part of our community, Susan Minot and Ursula Hegi, be the first to do the Wednesday Writer Speak for the fall semester. It can simulate that sense of community and cohort. So I thank them for being here. They both have actually done a collaborative poem, and they don't know it. Last night, I took a short story of Susan's and a novel of Ursula's, and I put some lines together, and they harmonized pretty well. It's pretty great. So I'm going to read Ursula and Susan's collaborative poem that they don't know they did. Okay. An almost handsome man making puffy noises in your ear, clicking in the shadows on the other side of the amplifier. His flat ears lovely even in death. A fatter heart, more stories to tell. That's why she drives fast, but not dangerously so. Expensive haircuts, but cheap furniture. The waves round and plowing in, buffalo-headed. After sex, you curl up like a shrimp. I was hiding the shrimp inside my fur coat until it became like sinking into a muck. You wonder about things feeling a little off-kilter because his facial features are tipped sideways. But it's like faces. You're never really surprised. The history of knowing each other. You seem to have disappeared. So that was the collaborative poem by Susan Minot and Ursula Hegi. I'm going to turn it over to Susan Minot. Yes, applaud yourselves. Well done. I'm going to turn it over to Susan. I'm going to give you her bio. One of the great things about two members of our Southampton community, they both have new works published this fall. And so it kind of lined up beautifully while other things in the world have not lined up beautifully. So let me give you Susan's bio, and we're going to turn things over to her. Booklist describes Susan Minot's Why I Don't Write in other stories as sterling, pristine, often erotic, gorgeous, and searing. An award-winning novelist, short story writer, poet, and screenwriter, her first novel, Monkeys, was published in a dozen countries and won the Prix Femina Étranger in France. Welcome, Susan Minot.
Thank you so much, Bobby. I'm very, very happy to be here, but I wish I was there with people. I like being alone as a writer. You choose it, I think, but enough is enough at this point. But I'm happy whoever is out there. I'm going to try to feel the vibe, and very happy to be reading with Ursula. That was a good poem. I particularly like the shrimp connection that you made, Bobby. I'm going to read from This Is It, Why I Don't Write, and Other Stories. Obviously an ironic title because one of the stories is a story called Why I Don't Write. But I'm going to read, so I'm going to read little bits from both, from two different stories in the book, so you can see how quite different they are. And maybe this isn't, I feel like we need to be cheered up, but I chose something that's not so much cheering up, except that I feel overall it might cheer you up because it's about 9/11, and it's about a character remembering being at 9/11. And somehow for me, when I think of that, it makes me feel like it's not as bad. that moment was sort of worse in many ways. What's happening now has some kind of, as far as COVID goes, some natural aspects to it. And anyway, I shouldn't be blabbing. I should just read. So this is from a short story called Occupied, and it's about a single mom who's rushing home to her 8-year-old son. She's been at the studio all day. She's a painter, and she realizes that she hasn't stopped at Zuccotti Park, where Occupied protesters have been camping out there. So in going to visit, she at one time in her life maybe would have been one of these protesters, but now with a child, she doesn't have the time and the space. But by returning to Southern Manhattan, she can't help but think of 9 years earlier, and about the Twin Towers coming down. So she's the one couldn't visit the neighborhood without thinking of that day. If you'd been in New York, you had your story. Hers, out in the morning exercising, the crisp sunlight, a blue September sky smooth as church glass, and the strangest sight of the high, pale tower with a plume of white smoke furling out of a black hole torn at the top. How could an airplane have been that out of control? And then the mounting awareness as fire trucks sirened southward and shopkeepers stood with crossed arms outside their doors, that this was not an accident. Then someone at a bus stop, everyone stood staring, saying a plane had hit the Pentagon, and on the strangely trafficless Lafayette Street, dark figures hurried away from the mayhem. Men in dark suits with briefcases and women in skirts walked rapidly uptown, manic, stiff-kneed. When they passed by, she saw their backs. From their heads down to their legs was powdered white. Later, drifting to Washington Square, she stood among milling people facing down West Broadway to one of the towers now engulfed in white smoke. Strangers muttered to one another, astonished. How many people did the building hold? How many floors were? When in an instant, the tower in front of them dropped like a souffle, vanishing before their eyes. A moan rose from the crowd. People stood frozen, then turned. They looked away. They looked back. They didn't move. The vision had been very like a hallucination. You could not believe what you were seeing. That was the phrase everyone kept using. They couldn't believe what they had seen. Her brain immediately registered the otherworldliness of the seconds. The image entered, and she was aware in that instant that it would never leave her. One of the thousands of images which the city gathered and posted and printed and beamed after that morning, none she saw had been from the precise place where she stood watching, as her knees buckled, dropping as the building dropped. That was one time when what was in front of her was greater in intensity than what she saw depicted after. Not like in the park in front of her now, which looked more puny than in its pictures. On that Tuesday morning, she felt that as a witness, she was a kind of custodian of the deaths. It sounded self-aggrandizing, so she never admitted the feeling, but she had taken it inside her, the obligation. But really, what kind of custodian could one be of such a thing? And what could one do with it? The sun was no longer visible now, having dropped behind the buildings, though the sky would be light for another hour. She wondered now as she paced down the sidewalk slope, past the maze of bundles and plastic bags, the occasional chair with a fluttering line of Tibetan prayer flags, how many people had actually witnessed it? the murder of thousands of people, and how many others kept that vision inside them and felt as she did to be a guardian of it. A fellow in black retro glasses was typing on a computer which rested on a large cardboard box from a washing machine, decorated all over with black X's and one large O, presumably for Occupy, with a smiley face inside. A sign nearby said, "Enough is enough." That, she thought, admiring its wide net, could be applied to everything. And so just got a few more minutes. I'm going to read from the title story, which is sort of right in the spine of the book of all these stories. And it is, as the title describes, you know, writers are often asked to write essays, Why I Write, and they often write very good essays about why they write. And they often don't know completely why they write, but I'm always eager to hear what other writers have to say. But they also don't always write or have trouble writing. So I ended up writing this story about the things that keep you from writing, which can be good things, distracting things, things that take your attention away to something else, which I think are particularly problematical with computers and phones, because we encounter many more things that can distract us or intrigue us or disturb us. So this is just a few, it's like bits of pieces swimming through the air, what's going on in the writer's mind. "What do you do all day?" she said. "Before waking, I found a deep slash in my upper arm. Out of the opening floated small lobsters." He went off his medication. The morning dishes, the tacky slick on the shelf, the flickering light, the cabinet door slipped off its hinge, the rotted sill, the curling screen. "Your system must be overloaded, or you have a virus." Where was the daughter? She was frozen, head bent down, her face awash in a light blue glow as if spotlit by aliens. Her finger flicked over the screen like a conductor. "What should we have for dinner?" "More eggs." "What's going on with the weather?" Arthur Rimbaud gave up writing poetry at age 21. During the sad movie, I feel a pain spread in my chest, becoming so sharp, I felt I was having a heart attack. Take 15 minutes out of the day. I walk on an empty road at dusk. Far off on the water, I hear a boat humming. I hear the flute call of a loon, then silence. Something dripping. Life is not right. We hope you will make it. We'd love to see you. It's been too long. Should we meet for lunch? Let's have a drink. You should come to Copenhagen. There's a 2:50 show. I have an extra ticket for tomorrow. The lines aren't too long. You have to see it. You have to watch it. You have to read it. All day, you ask yourself, what are you doing all day? 53 dead, not including the shooter. When you take the plant out of the plastic container, pull the thin roots to dangle down and place into the hole. Give it water. The title of the song, Crawl to Me, Baby, Crawl to Me. Are you going to the march? They heard back from the doctor. It was not good news. I walk around the city and listen to people as I pass them on the sidewalks. Usually they are talking on their phones. Often they are not looking at where they are going. They are looking into their palms. You're in the wrong line. Your line is over there. The sweet air in the morning, warmed by the sun. Headache, hunger, the thumping far below the floor. Death estimates ran from 150 to 500, but could not be confirmed. You write if you have to.
That was great. Thank you, Susan. That was fantastic.
Very
Really
welcome.
great stuff. Yeah. For those of you watching on YouTube, there is a chat section, and you can throw any questions you have for Susan and Ursula in the chat, and I will get to them after Ursula's done reading. But thank you, Susan, very much. We'll move on to Ursula Hegi right now. Ursula Hegi's new novel, The Patron Saint of Pregnant Girls, has been called haunting, uplifting, a celebration of women, mothers, and daughters. A bicultural writer, Hegi didn't plan to set nearly half of her novels in Germany and the other half in the Americas. But that's how the pages have opened for her, reflecting what it is like to be an immigrant. And with that, I turn it over to Ursula Hegi.
Thank you, Bobby. I really enjoyed your reading, Susan. Thank you. And all of you who are making this possible, thank you. I have to figure out what it's like to be, what was it, Bobby, with the awkward? Was something, our awkwardness, what was that? You were
I feel like we're
talking about,
adorably awkward.
yeah, it felt
Yeah.
right there. I know what
It can
that's
be
like.
tricky. Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to read to you from my new novel. It's called The Patron Saint of Pregnant Girls. And it's an excerpt nearly 1/3 into the novel. And the characters you meet here, you are basically meeting for the first time. What seizes my heart the first time I see the sensational Sebastian is how he fastens his eyes on me, only me, as he lets go of the trapeze and catapults himself through the air in his emerald suit, a man built for flying. I'm sure he hasn't performed with the Ludwig Circus before, because I went to the show every September when the circus arrived in Rodenes, my village near the German-Danish border, where I went to school and served my apprenticeship at the Becker Model Atelier. I came for the stories the ringmaster staged. Herr Ludwig had such high regard for his monkeys that he assigned them roles in his biblical stories, elevating them to saints and angels. Affectionate and clever, they brought him whatever he wanted for his stories: banners, candles, a stuffed parrot, or Moses' stone tablets. Although his stories began with scenes from the Bible, he roused his audience to change the outcome with their imagination and memories. As ringmaster, he tapped into your hunger for magic because he understood you hadn't come to see a performance. No, you'd come so that he could show you what you wanted. Something fantastic, so uniquely yours, that later, when you talked about the Ludwig Circus, you'd mention details others won't recall. The white dog's blue eyelids, say, or Lucia the clown, or that Lucia the clown reminded you of your Erbtante inheritance art. Outside the big tent, the sensational Sebastian stands in his shimmering suit and extends one hand as if to bless me. He lays 2 fingers between my eyebrows. I have not seen you before, I managed to say, intimidated by his elegance and confidence. It's my first year with the Ludwigs. Instead of going home, I let him lead me toward a wagon decorated with panels of life-sized angels and saints. The entrance is in the center of a carved panel with the Annunciation scene. As he folds down his front stoop, the door swings open, and I have to laugh because here I stand in front of the Jungfrau Maria while the Archangel Gabriel informs her she'll carry the Son of God inside her womb. Why are you laughing? The sensational Sebastian asks. So I want to say here that I considered many different names for the sensational Sebastian, sort of all on the same level. I considered the fantastic Ferdinand, the wonderful Waldemar, the cowardly Cornelius, the thoughtless Theodore, and the lying Leonard. But ultimately, I went with the sensational Sebastian. I also should say that this scene is set around the middle of the 19th century. I motioned toward the panel. Plenty of warning for any woman who has her doubts about Immaculate Conception. Ah, so you would like to come inside? I would like to stay outside, I say, intent on hiding my awkwardness. Should I believe you? Quickly, I sit down on the front stoop, hide my hands in the pleats of my skirt, hands chapped from fine stitching and from lace. I'm a seamstress, wedding and evening, silk and satin, lace and beads. Does the seamstress have a name, or must I invent one for her? Sabine Florian, I say, wishing I'd let him invent a fashionable name for me. The sensational Sebastian lowers himself next to me on the stoop, one elbow braced against the Archangel Gabriel's wooden knee. His thighs stretch the emerald fabric, those eyes of his, burning my skin. I want to touch the dip of his throat. No. Don't let some archangel scare you away. His smile. No woman in the world for him but me. I won't let him distract me, as he tells me about growing up in a circus family. Once I was 2, I trained daily, bending and leaping and hanging. That's awfully young. With children, you have to start early. Not that early. I walked on my hands before I turned 3. He sounds proud. I earned my own money before I could count it. He doesn't have the propriety to spare me from his gaze, as most people will when your face is afire, and I long to brush against his thigh, undo the braided closures on its emerald jacket. The fabric is worn shiny, but the design is fashionable, sculpting his chest and waist and shoulders. I can learn to copy this design once I sew his clothes. Though my mother has warned me about the fragile worth of a young woman's reputation, I follow the sensational Sebastian into his Annunciation wagon. I've never been with a woman who wants sex as much as a man, he tells me, when I wake to sun through the curtain and the shadow of a wash line against the wall. The heat of his breath races from my ear to my down there. I feel luscious, greedy. Women, he says, endure man's lust without pleasure. I can't believe I'm the only woman who... Oh, but you are, Sabine. He studies my face closely. Is he shocked by my appetites, intrigued, trying to prove to himself and to me that I'm not like other women? I'm embarrassed, pushed back. How many women? He makes a fist, counts his fingers as he lets them pop up, makes another fist, counting. 8. That includes you. Hardly enough for your assumption about women. He'll laugh. He laughs. You'll make me reconsider. About those women before me? He presses himself against me, traces my jaw from one earlobe to the other. Those women merely endured you? He yanks an invisible blade from his chest. How about you and men? 9, I lie, tripling my sins to be ahead of him. Did you count me? I try for a mysterious smile. Did you, Sabine? Not yet. I swing myself across his thighs, flick my thumbs across his nipples, then wake my fingers toward his navel. Who am I? What am I doing? And down through his pubic hair without touching him there, not yet, though he bucks to get himself into my hand. The sensational Sebastian and I lived 3 wagons from the kitchen wagon called The Last Supper. I've missed my chance of returning home the night of the show, missed it again the following morning. And now that I've missed that chance for 11 days, it's too late to go home, too soon. I earn my wages, mend costumes, match old designs, help the sensational Sebastian brew an elixir that he claims will make mortals live forever. Though skeptical, I make sure he swallows a spoonful at breakfast, because every time he performs, I'm terrified he'll tumble into death. His hand will sweat and slip from the trapeze, or he won't catch the trapeze as he flies toward its arc. I cannot imagine being without him. I'm skipping. Everyone at this Ludwig Circus speaks and dreams in several languages, evidence of where we've lived and worked, plenty to serve us as we cross the borders. Dutch, German, and Italian for both Ludwigs, French and German for the sensational Sebastian, Russian and German for Lucia the clown, half a dozen languages for Marlis the cook and her husband, Danish and German for me. Back home in Rodenez, I recalled my dreams upon waking, but being with the sensational Sebastian erases those flicker images of night, draws me beyond my skin toward him. In the towns where we set up the big tent, the sensational Sebastian points out statues in park and cemeteries. He says men who turned to stone because they settled in one place. Those statues have never been anything but stone. Oh, Sabinchen. He cups his long hands around my face, kisses me, and again. Chiseled from stone to resemble humans, I whisper into his mouth. I love you so much. Tears in his eyes, he blinks them away. You're so lucky it's me you found. Before you turned to stone? No, his laugh lines deepen. I miss my dreams. I mean lucky you didn't get seduced by one of those fellows who have a new woman every season. Some women will follow a circus for months. Once I'm with the child, I stop correcting the sensational Sebastian about staying in motion to prevent his body from turning to stone. It's a story he needs to believe, just as I need to believe that with me he'll be different. Stay, forever the playful lover who turns to me, only me, after he's dazzled every female in the audience. But he grows restless, smokes more, can't fall asleep in the quiet. We winter on farmland by the Rhine in Emmerich, the last German town before the Dutch border, where local children come to spy on our training sessions. I nest, sew blue curtains and line them with muslin, stencil the wooden floor of the Annunciation wagon with clouds. The second week of February 1859, it gets so cold that the sensational Sebastian and I don't want to get out of bed. Snow pelts the river at a slant as if drawn with chalk, but inside our Annunciation wagon, we keep each other warm. I think Lucia likes the giant Novak, I say. The sensational Sebastian leaps up, pounds the window. Stop it, you! I rise to my knees, raise my belly. What is it? A cluster of farm boys hooting and throwing snowballs at two dogs frozen together while mating. As the dogs yowl and try to scramble in opposite directions, the boys throw more snowballs. "Stop it, you!" The sensational Sebastian pounds the window. The boys shriek, clap. In a frenzy now, the dogs bite the air, struggle to pull apart. Stark naked and yelling, the sensational Sebastian leaps from our wagon, shakes his fists at the boys. A thick stripe of brown hair crawls up his back and neck. Tufts of hair sprout on his shoulders. Like a bear, a savage beast. The boys scatter. As he kneels in the deep snow and steadies the dogs, rubbing their throats and muzzles, I think what a tender father he will be after all. I had no idea he could be that gentle, that patient. Tears in my eyes, I watch him slide his hands low beneath the dogs' bellies, stroking and talking and warming them till he can guide them apart. The sensational Sebastian loves me for as long as he can see the exit. As I grow wider around our child, I block the light. Still, he gets past me, joins another circus that's traveling inland, proves himself a visionary and me a dreamer. There are men like that, Herr Ludwig tells me, always on the way to somewhere else. Was he more restless than others? He was terrified. Of me? Of living in any one place and forgetting the road. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ursula. That was great. It was fantastic.
You're welcome.
For those of you
So good.
watching with me, we have a couple of questions for Susan and Ursula. And if you have more, feel free to type them out in the chat. Ursula, this question is for you. It's from Amy, and she was curious as the current climate regarding immigrants affected your writing of this story.
The story was finished before before all these things happened, okay? It certainly affected my life, the things I worked for. Being an immigrant, though, has affected much of what I've written. And I identify with many immigrants because we all live on this invisible border between our countries of origin and the countries we have chosen or fled to. And I've thought about that a lot in the last year before that. I think about children in cages. I think about concentration camps. And I have felt since about 4 years ago, or even 5 years ago, that there were so many similarities. The cult around one leader, the recklessness, the violence. And I'm terrified for all of us.
Thank you for sharing that, Ursula. And while we have a platform, I'd like to remind anybody, check your voting registration, register to vote, get
Yes.
those mail-in ballot requests early to avoid postal pitfalls. New York, that's kind of easy, but check out vote.org if you have a different state. Let me check to see what other questions we have. A lot of praise, a lot of thanks. Paul Harding says, as Gogol said to Chekhov, Ursula and Susan make me feel like I write with a log instead of a pen. Admiration to you both. Yeah.
His work is
we
wonderful.
want to be inspiring. We want to inspire.
Kaylin has a question for Susan regarding the first story. Kaylin asks, Susan, do you find yourself returning to the 9/11 story each year on the anniversary?
I actually, I think about 9/11 a lot. not just on the anniversary. And I didn't write about it for a long time. It seemed like one of those things that, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but that was so big. What do you say about it? So it was only in writing about the sort of haunted part of it, and sort of the very, very, I guess, zeroing in on the precise moment and the impact of that moment, was as much as I felt like I could articulate with any kind of, assurance. I do think of, like I say, I think of it often. You don't have to go down to Lower Manhattan to think about 9/11.
I like how both of you just compared, major tragedies that we have the shared experience. Ursula, you're being from Germany and the 9/11 experience compared to what we see now and how that's constantly relating. That's one of the beautiful things about the world, that we can relate through your vision of that. Let me see. I want to ask a question to Ursula real quick. In guest lectures that I've been a part of that you've given, you've said some really inspiring things about research and kind of researching from an imaginative perspective. I heard you say one time that you were kayaking to pick out a house for your character. I'm
Yes.
curious how that type of imaginative and creative research applies at a time when we're all kind of insulated during COVID.
I still kayak. I'm not looking for a house right now, but I think of the imagining as something very internal, and the way I'm wired since I was a little kid. I'm glad I am wired that way. Little earlier today, I did a class for Carla and Bob, and we talked about some research I did trying to find out how very young girls who end up in the St. Margaret home for pregnant girls, how they think about the baby that got inside them. Most of them don't quite understand it. They're as young as 11 years old. And I found amazing, amazing details as I researched that contributed to the story. Then I did a little more research that came out of that, and that had to do with the midwife who works at the home wants to teach the girls about contraception so they don't get pregnant right away when they leave. And some of the things I read, this is like middle of the 19th century, were sort of familiar, but then I came across one that, it was so good. It was so fitting for the book that I almost screamed, and I tell you why. This is the island of Nordstrand. The baby home is the biggest industry, and the second biggest industry is toy making. And there are countless toy makers who make toys, but most of all, building blocks that come together as fairy tales. And, they're carved on all sides. And the midwife, when she finds out about the block, putting it into the vagina against the cervix, she decides to order blocks from the toy makers. And she doesn't tell them why, because she'd get fired. And the toy makers have so much compassion for these young girls that they try to make it extra beautiful for them. So they carve and they paint and it hurt me even thinking about it. The midwife then orders another set of blocks, sanded, edges curved, and but she doesn't tell them why. But this is one of the gifts of research. I wouldn't have come up with this by myself, and it really took storyline somewhere else.
Thank you for that. That's great. Susan, I have a question for you as it relates to COVID. I'm assuming that Why I Don't Write and those took a stronghold. Is that correct? Did you write those beforehand?
Well, I'm sorry, you cut out a little. Why I Don't Write, and then what did you say?
Did you write those before COVID had taken over the world as strongly as it had? I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious how something like how that piece, the pictures of that piece, completely changes, but is completely relevant in a way that like the world kind of rewrote the work in a way. I was wondering if you could talk about your experience in writing something that becomes relevant in a different way.
Well, I actually was correcting the galleys for this right after the shutdown started, and it was interesting to be looking at sort of pages with this other thing going on, and kind of one always looks and thinks, when you're writing, is anyone going to care about this or not? You know, when suddenly things change in a big way. And while I was correcting Why I Don't Write in particular, I thought this is actually, you know, it's not so much about what's going on in the world, but it addresses how we, which is kind of one of the things I think I feel more competent to focus on, how we go through our days. You know, what fills our minds and what we do with that, how much we can choose what's in our minds or choose to follow what's in our minds. And of course that has become in a way more of a consideration with COVID, because we don't have all those usual things that we would distract ourselves with. So it's really just a kind of looking at one's, you know, thought process, that maybe we are looking at our thought processes a little more now, because a lot of the things that we did, just even, you know, driving, getting to work every day, or, you know, it takes over your mind in a different way, and that we're staying much more in you know, small places and stuff. It's we're being forced to sort of face our brains a little more, or our thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I can't remember the line exactly, but it was like all day you were asking yourself about what you're going to do all day, and what you said, and that kind of that's relevant.
Well, there's one line. Yeah, I was just gonna say there's one line with, she asks, "What do you do all day?" Like someone else is asking, and then the writer is saying, she asks herself, "What am I doing all day?" Like,
Exactly.
not so much what am I doing, is it enough? Like, am I doing what I need to be doing? It's, you know, that's a lot of the juggling that a writer does, I think. And I tell my students that, you know, that accept that as being part of the process. Like, you don't have this beeline and know what you're always writing about, and it's only at a very advanced stage of writing that you really zero in on what you're writing about. So this state of having thoughts come in and out, you have to, that's part of it.
Carla has a great question. This for both of you. How do you approach an online reading differently from an in-person reading? I guess Ursula, we can start with you.
I don't know yet. This is actually the first online reading. I've had a couple of online interviews. I'm really, really, really happy to not have to go on book tour. I find book tour very difficult. And so being able to do interviews online is great. I just go into my study and that's it. And I think I'm more relaxed. With the reading, I miss the community of writers, the students, the faculty, and I would drive to Southampton to do that instead of this. But I'm glad we have this as an option instead of just having nothing to communicate.
Susan, how do you approach it differently?
I agree with Ursula about not having to leave your kitchen table. You know, that part of it is pretty nice. I always work at my kitchen table, I seem to. And even, you know, there is that part of giving readings where you're sort of doing something. You're not always in conversation with people. They're kind of there to hear you. But in doing the Zoom readings or the conversations with people, you realize how much it seemed like you weren't connecting as much as you would have liked. But then, you know, we'll end this reading and, you know, leave, we'll press the thing, and then I'll just be here with, like, you really aren't interacting at all. So I really realize how much more I felt engaged to be with people when you present your book to them, more than I thought, I have to say. Yeah.
I wonder how much of that has to do, like, we're yearning to hear it too. We're yearning for that community and hearing, you know, cathartic art. And I like that you brought up, it's a totally different decompression after a social interaction. It's just gone. It evaporates, it disappears instead of moving and traveling somewhere back. That's a really great insight.
And actually, listening to you, Susan, I realized that I do miss, I said, I'm glad I don't have to do book tour, but that part of engaging, as you described it, of course, I do miss that.
I mean, there are other things about a book tour that are sort of tiring and disorienting, and you think, oh, I'm so glad to do that. But I, you know, realize from where I'm sitting now that actually there was more engagement than I realized. I mean, I guess you realize that when you have none at all, you know, so.
Yeah.
But your reading was great, Ursula. You're looking at the screen as you were reading, and your voice, and it was really beautiful to hear you. And I felt like I was closer to you. So that's a nice thing.
That is a nice thing. And I can't wait to get your book and look at the story, why I don't write. Because I love the different elements you pull in there. And I imagine quite a few space breaks there, right?
It's also space breaks. And some people have called it a poem. You know, I really like that poem.
It has that feeling. So yeah.
It's more like that.
I like that poem. Yeah.
We have a great question from Molly Gaudry, and she was wondering what you might be looking forward to working on soon, and where's your writing energy right now? I guess we can start with Susan.
My energy is I'm trying to keep it going. It's, you know, I get moments, and then, you know, you realize that even in isolation, there were, you know, you knew the moments you had kind of refuel. So I'm actually working on a novel that is, dare I say, almost 4 years overdue. And these stories I was writing, some of them I was writing just to get something finished so I wouldn't feel like I was just in the bottom of a well the whole time. So I'm trying to finish that novel. It kind of keeps getting bigger. And I mean, it will get bigger and I'll pull back on it because that's what I usually do. But the first story I read, Occupied, is actually a outtake from the novel. It's like a chapter that I made into a short story, so I could sort of lift it out to see if maybe it would feel alive in the world. But so that's what I'm working on. Overdue novel.
We all in a perpetual state of overdue novel, or
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. You gotta tell you, that's part of it.
Ursula, how about you? Where's your writing energy? What are you looking for? What are you working on right now?
I've been researching a German artist. Her name is Käthe Kollwitz for the last 8 years, but I've also been working on the book that was just published. And now for the past year, I've been really immersed in the novel about Käthe Kollwitz. And it's a very different book because I know so many things about her life. I have probably 40 or 50 books here written in German by people about her art. And I've adored her since I was a little girl. So it feels like a really good project for me. On a daily basis, though, I find it harder to write. I keep listening for something to happen, almost. A member of my household has some health issues, and so I'm always listening. But I don't think that's the only thing. It's the threat of the political situation. I don't watch it on television, but I read a lot. And with this book about Käthe Kollwitz, it starts 1867, but there is a lot in 1930 when she is arrested by the Gestapo, and her work is called Entartete Kunst, degenerate art. So I'm going there again in my writing.
Fantastic.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks.
Always
listening, and I mean, why don't I write? Because I'm always listening. But I really appreciate you both. Before we wrap things up, is there anything directly you would like to address to the community, the cohort, while we have the floor? Susan?
I would echo what you said about voting. It is possibly, not just possible, I think it's more important this election than any election that I can think of in my lifetime. I was born after the war, so in terms of Hitler, I had no impact, but it feels like this, I'm settled with it. It's part of my heritage, even though I wasn't alive. And here there are so many similarities. It's the same playbook. It's the same cult worship, the lying. It keeps me awake. So please vote.
I would totally second that, to vote. I would also, just thinking of where we are at the moment, suggest that in the sort of slowed down version of our lives, to, instead of focusing on the virus, I mean, we kind of know what we need to do to stay safe, to turn our attention to kind of environmental concerns.
Yeah.
Because I think, if you can see COVID as a little tiny version of everything having to be shut down and recalibrated, and that's that's where we're heading with much bigger issues
Yes.
Worldwide. And so for people to, instead of thinking, let's go, we want to get back to normal, I think, maybe that's not the idea here. Maybe this is a chance for us to sort of have a vision for where going, once health issues aren't as challenging, what we can do to make the planet a little. I was just out, I'm on an island in Maine right now, and I took a walk and was watching the sunset, and it's streaked with the smoke from the fires in out west. So I feel, that hurt me.
Yes.
So we're all under the smoke of that fire, and this is a good paused moment where we can maybe really do something differently.
I like that. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you both. And everyone watching, if the great thing about this Wednesday Writer Speak is that you take class with these teachers. They teach her. So I believe, Susan, you said you're going to be teaching next semester. And Ursula, you only teach in the fall, correct?
I only teach in the spring, but next spring I'm taking off. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then.
Yeah, I'm teaching now. I hope some of my students kind of tuned in. I'm teaching a seminar on the short story, and then this spring I'll be teaching a workshop. Okay. And one other good thing with COVID, one of my students is literally in Shanghai. And she wakes up, our class is at 5 p.m., and she wakes up at 5 a.m. the next day, and Jingzhou is there. So that's, that wouldn't have happened without this too. So
yeah.
That's cool.
I appreciate you both. Thank you so much for your words, your readings, and your expertise. Beautiful. Let's go to wrap it up for
Bobby.
Yeah.
That was I couldn't
Bobby,
tell. I couldn't
you.
even keep straight. Which was my line? Will you send that to us so we can look at it?
I will.
Bobby, what's the painting behind you? Is that something you painted?
Thank you. No, it's not. It's my wife's grandfather, Belisario Contreras. He was an expressionist painter. He also was in the Ghost Army in World War II, which was a branch of the army that were artists and set designers who created fake airstrips to detract bombs.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's interesting how you curate your space into these worlds that we're sharing. Thank you for that. And I wanted to get to more information about, because Susan's a painter, and she talks about how other mediums work together. I guess, Susan, I'll give you a chance to say something. You have something closing remarks?
They actually can be a distracting thing. It maybe can be another reader. I think it's one of the lines in Why I Don't Write. You apply the brush to the cube of watercolor, and you sometimes that's a more for me, it's not the thing I'm supposed to be doing, so therefore it's a little more fun still, but yeah, no, it's meditative, and maybe it's because it's more fun. It's not the thing I do all the time, because you're not supposed to have fun all the time, apparently.
Thank you both. And folks out there, The next Wednesday Writer Speak will be on September 30th, and we'll have Regina Porter. Appreciate the communal energy from all of you. Susan, Ursula, thank you. Have a great night,
You're
everybody.
very welcome.
Ursula, it was
Yeah,
great
thanks
to hear
for
you.
taking
Thank
us through this. Yeah.
you.